You wake up with a sore throat and a runny nose. You walk to the medicine cabinet, take something for it, and by lunchtime, you're fine. Now take all of that away. No pharmacy, no doctor, no hospital down the road, no search engine to tell you whether your headache is nothing or something serious. Just you, the wilderness, and whatever knowledge your ancestors managed to pass down. Here's the strange part. They made it work. For hundreds of thousands of years, long before antibiotics, before surgery, before anyone even knew what a germ was, humans not only survived, but built entire civilizations. So how did they actually pull that off? Before we go further, we need to drop a common misconception. Most people picture ancient humans as basically modern people minus the tools, helpless, guessing, hoping for the best. That's not accurate. Ancient people weren't ignorant. They were sharp observers, deeply practical, and they had one major advantage: thousands of years of trial and error passed down through generations. When you live close to nature, and death is a real daily possibility, you pay close attention. You notice which plant calms an upset stomach. You notice which treatment helps a wound close faster. You notice that drinking water downstream from a dead animal is a bad idea. That knowledge moved from grandmother to granddaughter, from healer to apprentice, never written down, but stored just as reliably in memory and shared tradition. What emerged wasn't a perfect system, but it was far more effective than most people assume. Let's start with the most widespread tool ancient people had access to: plants. This isn't folklore. This is real pharmacology with roots stretching back at least 60,000 years, and we have the physical evidence to prove it. In 1960, researchers uncovered a Neanderthal burial site in Shanidar Cave in Iraq. Inside, they found unusually high concentrations of pollen from several plant species: yarrow, groundsel, ephedra, and others. The leading explanation is that these weren't stray weeds that blew in by accident. They were placed there deliberately. And here's the detail that makes it even more remarkable. Several of those exact plants are still used in herbal medicine today, and some have been clinically studied and shown to carry genuine medicinal properties. Neanderthals were practicing herbal medicine before modern humans had even reached that part of the world. Once modern humans entered the picture, plant-based treatment became far more advanced. Willow bark, which contains salicin, the same compound aspirin is derived from, was used independently in ancient Egypt, Greece, China, and among indigenous peoples of North America to treat pain and fever on completely separate continents, because the same basic observation kept repeating: chew this bark, the pain fades. That's where we're headed in this video. Plants, wound care, brain surgery with stone tools, immune systems shaped by evolution, and the surprising science behind rituals. Healers didn't fully understand, but somehow got right. Garlic was used by ancient Egyptians as a natural antibiotic, and modern research has actually confirmed it carries real antimicrobial properties. Turmeric, used for thousands of years in Ayurvedic medicine, contains curcumin, a compound with documented anti-inflammatory effects. Echinacea, long used by Native American tribes to support immune function, is still sitting on pharmacy shelves today. But this went far deeper than just chewing on random plants. Ancient healers developed genuinely sophisticated preparation methods. They knew which plants needed to be boiled and which didn't. They knew certain roots only worked once properly dried. They combined multiple plants in precise proportions and carefully observed the results. Some ancient remedies involved dozens of separate ingredients. One as the active compound, another to mask a bitter taste, another to aid absorption, another to counter side effects. That's not folklore. That's empirical pharmacology, minus the lab coats. In a very real sense, ancient people were running one enormous uncontrolled experiment. The sample size was all of humanity. The process was messy. The failure rate was undeniably high. But the results, more often than not, actually worked. Now let's talk about something ancient humans dealt with constantly: wounds. Whether from hunting, conflict, or simply tripping in the dark, injuries were everywhere. Without antiseptics or stitches, a small cut could become infected and turn fatal within days. So, what did they actually do? First, honey. Ancient Egyptians used honey on wounds extensively, and it wasn't just superstition. Honey is genuinely antibacterial. It has a low pH, high sugar content, and releases small amounts of hydrogen peroxide, all of which create a hostile environment for bacteria. Modern medicine has quietly rediscovered this. There's a medically approved honey-based product used in clinical wound care today. The ancient Egyptians weren't wrong. Second, mud and clay. Certain mineral-rich clays have genuine antimicrobial properties, and indigenous cultures across the globe applied clay poultices to wounds. Again, not wrong. Third, and stay with me here, maggots. Maggot therapy, where fly larvae are placed on infected wounds to consume dead tissue, was used by Aboriginal Australians, Maya communities in Central America, and military field surgeons throughout history. It's still used today in modern hospitals for wounds that don't respond to standard antibiotics. Maggots eat only dead tissue and leave healthy tissue untouched. They're remarkably efficient, wound-cleaning tools. Ancient people didn't discover this by being strange. They discovered it by paying close attention. They noticed wounds treated this way sometimes healed better, and instead of dismissing it, they remembered. And then there's spider silk. Multiple ancient cultures, Greek, Celtic, Native American, pressed spider webs directly onto wounds to slow bleeding. It sounds bizarre, but spider silk contains vitamin K, which supports blood clotting, along with some antimicrobial properties. Modern researchers have actually studied spider silk as a potential wound closure material. Once again, ancient observation quietly stumbled onto something real. Now, here's where things get genuinely jaw-dropping. We have solid archaeological evidence of trepanation, the practice of drilling or scraping a hole into the skull, dating back over 9,000 years. And before you ask, yes, patients survived. We know this because the bone shows clear signs of healing around the opening, meaning the person didn't die on the spot. Some skulls even show multiple healed openings, meaning the same individual went through the procedure more than once and lived through it each time. Why did they do it? Theories range from treating head injuries, relieving pressure after skull fractures, addressing severe headaches or seizures, and, let's be honest, probably some spiritual reasoning too. Ancient medicine and ancient religion were deeply intertwined, and it's often hard to tell where one ended and the other began. But here's what we know for certain. People were performing brain surgery 9,000 years ago using stone tools, and patients were surviving it. We also have evidence of amputations that healed cleanly. A skeleton discovered in France, dated to roughly 7,000 years ago, shows a forearm amputation with clear signs of bone regrowth, meaning the person survived long enough for the wound to actually heal. That required more than just the surgical act itself. It required aftercare, wound management, infection control, and ongoing support for a recovering patient. That's not a lucky one-off. That's a functioning medical support system. For context, modern antiseptic practice only became standard in the 1860s, when Joseph Lister realized doctors should wash their hands before operating. Hospitals in the 1840s actually had higher death rates than battlefield surgeries because conditions were so unsanitary. It's entirely possible that ancient surgeons working outdoors in fresh air with clean stone tools had better sterility than 19th century European hospitals. History has a strange sense of humor sometimes. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. Ancient humans didn't survive purely because of the remedies they used. They survived because of what was already inside them. An immune system shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure into something remarkably capable. The immune system learns. It adapts. The more pathogens a population encounters across generations, the more resistant the survivors become. Ancient humans were exposed to an enormous range of pathogens from birth, constantly training their defenses. Children who made it through early childhood often grew into immunologically tough adults. There's also the idea of herd immunity without vaccines. When disease repeatedly swept through a community, those who were naturally more resistant tended to survive and reproduce, and over generations, the population as a whole became more resistant to that specific illness. It was slow, brutal, and involved enormous loss of life, but it worked. This partly explains why European contact with the Americas was so devastating to indigenous populations. It wasn't that Europeans were biologically stronger. It's that they carried diseases their ancestors had been building resistance to for centuries, while indigenous populations had no prior exposure at all. Modern research increasingly points to the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living inside your intestines, as central to immune function, mental health, and overall well-being. Ancient humans, it turns out, likely had a remarkably diverse microbiome by modern standards. Why? Because they ate an incredibly varied diet of wild plants, fermented foods, and animal products. Because they were constantly exposed to soil and its microorganisms. Because they simply weren't sterilizing everything around them. Fermented foods show up in nearly every ancient culture. Fermentation began as a preservation method, but it also happens to load food with beneficial bacteria. Kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, kvass, injera. Every traditional culture had its own version, and each one functioned as a probiotic that would put modern supplements to shame. Recent studies comparing modern hunter-gatherer populations to industrialized populations find striking differences. Hunter-gatherers showed dramatically higher microbial diversity, and higher diversity is consistently linked to better immune function, lower autoimmune disease rates, and better metabolic health. There's growing research suggesting that rising rates of allergies, autoimmune conditions, and certain mental health issues in industrialized societies may be partly connected to the loss of microbial diversity in our guts, driven by antibiotics, ultra-processed food, and our obsession with cleanliness. Let's talk about something that sounds unscientific, but has genuine research behind it: the placebo effect. If you believe you're going to improve, you often do. This isn't mysticism. It's documented neuroscience. The placebo effect produces measurable changes in pain perception, immune activity, and recovery speed, and it works even when patients know they're receiving a placebo. Ancient healers, shamans, medicine women, medicine men understood this intuitively, even without the vocabulary for it. The ritual mattered. The healer's confidence mattered. The visible support of the whole community mattered. When a healer performed an elaborate ceremony over a sick person, the patient's brain received a powerful message. You are being cared for. People are fighting for you. Something is being done. That signal has real physiological effects: cortisol drops, immune activity shifts, pain perception changes, and recovery often genuinely improves. Fairness requires we mention the limits too. Bacterial infections past a certain threshold were fatal. Appendicitis, now treated with routine surgery, killed people outright. Childbirth was extraordinarily dangerous. Infant mortality was brutal. In many ancient populations, between a quarter and half of children didn't reach adulthood. But if you survived childhood and avoided violence or childbirth complications, living into your 50s, 60s, or even 70s was entirely possible. Ancient Egyptian medicine, documented in the Ebers Papyrus around 1550 BCE, describes over 700 remedies and includes real descriptions of the cardiovascular system alongside surgical procedures. Traditional Chinese medicine developed acupuncture, herbal treatment, and dietary therapy over thousands of years. Ayurvedic medicine from India cataloged the properties of hundreds of plants and developed surgical techniques so advanced that 18th century British surgeons traveled to India to learn reconstructive procedures from local practitioners. The ancient Greeks gave us Hippocrates, who proposed something radical for his time. Disease comes from natural causes: diet, environment, physical imbalance, not angry gods. That single idea, that the body follows understandable natural laws is the foundation modern medicine still stands on. Ancient humans survived without medicine in the modern sense because they were never truly without medicine at all. They had active plant compounds, wound care techniques that worked despite lacking germ theory, immune systems hardened by generations of exposure, gut health maintained through fermentation, and healers who understood the psychological power of ritual and community. And they had each other. Humans are deeply social creatures, and social connection has measurable effects on survival. Loneliness is now recognized as one of the strongest risk factors for early death, comparable to smoking. Social isolation harms, social connection heals. That was true 50,000 years ago, and it's true today. We have MRI machines and organ transplants now. We've done things in the last 150 years that would look like sorcery to anyone before 1850. And yet, the fundamentals haven't changed. Eat real food, stay connected, move your body, manage stress, sleep enough. The advice your doctor gives you today isn't so different from what a healer told someone sitting by a fire 10,000 years ago. The tools changed completely. The person receiving the advice didn't.